I'd like to I'll give a little background to some things. So the word cloak refers to a coat, right? And it's also a sleeping bag. So if you lived 2,000 years ago, when you wanted to go out and you weren't going to get back in time, you wore your cloak, because if you have to sleep outside that night, you'd have you sleep in your cloak, your cloak. Another thing for background is, of course, as you know, we're talking about the time Jesus was alive, and Romans occupied Israel at that time. They had Israel under their thumb, and there were a lot of prophecies that the Israeli people, the Jews, trusted in and thought about a better time was down the road, a better time was coming. And like one prophecy said, excuse me, that God was going to come and stand on the Mount of Olives. Let's draw this up a little quick. Hey, Margaret, could you get me that portable mic, please? Turn it on. Portable, Margaret, look up to me. Look at me, it's right over there. Thanks. Okay, this is my, okay, awesome. So yeah, here we have Jerusalem, and roughly drawn, and just a few miles away to the east was the Mount of Olives, and the prophecy said God was going to come down and stand on this mountain, and it was going to split in half, and he was going to wipe out the enemies of Israel that were occupying Jerusalem. Basically, Jerusalem was going to be freed because of God's intervention. Here, I got it. All right, let's see if that happens again. Another prophecy was that the Messiah was going to come. Messiah, it meant anointing, and back then, when God called somebody to be the king, he would have the high priest go out with the holy oil and put the holy oil on the head of the person that was supposed to be the king, and that person was anointed with the oil, and that made him legitimately the king of Israel. So the anointed one, or the smeared one, is the word is Messiah, and from that word in Greek comes to us as Christ. And so anyway, there are a lot of prophecies that the Messiah was going to come, and when he came, he was going to work with God, and they were going to be like, Israel was going to be turned into this beautiful place. The borders were going to be safe. Jerusalem was going to be the city of God. There's going to be the lamb and the lion were going to lie down together, and they both were going to survive the event. The land was going to flow with milk and honey. It was going to be the beautiful time was coming, and that's when the Messiah was going to come, and that's what the hope was that the Jews had at that time. More background, Passover. So they had a cool thing back then. One of the laws that they had to follow was the rule about 3 times a year they had to go to Jerusalem. No matter where they lived in the country, they're supposed to go to Jerusalem and celebrate Passover. Well, celebrate one of the 3 festivals. The biggest one of the year was Passover. And it turned out to be like a camping thing, you know? Like, picture Jesus. Let me take a look at over here. Let me grab. So Jesus lived up in Nazareth, and here's Jerusalem down here. So in Nazareth, like, they couldn't walk through Samaria; it's too dangerous. There was a lot of enmity between these 2 peoples. So what they would do, the people in this area, they would go to the Jordan River and follow the roads down to Jerusalem. So this was about 60 miles. It'd take about 3 days. So what they would do is they had some relatives over here in Capernaum. So they probably hightailed it up to Capernaum, picked up their relatives, and all of them together, and any other friends and relatives they had in different villages along the way. They would just pick them up as they went along, and then they would all arrive to Jerusalem like one big parade. Right? It's a big camping thing. Like they sleeping outdoors during the day. At night. During the day, walking about 20 miles. And they get to see their relatives, see their friends. And I kind of think it was kind of a cool thing. But that's what they did back then. Also, the experience of Passover was a purifying of the soul. Right? See, God made these rules in the Holy Scriptures that they had to be a holy people. If they were a holy people, God would protect them, would protect their borders, and let them be a strong country. If they weren't, then God was going to let the enemies come in and take over. So Passover itself would be a way to purify your heart. You could purify the whole nation if everyone did it. And so that was the thing that was about Passover. There was one day of the year that was the best day. If you were going to try to overthrow the Romans, it was the day right after Passover. Actually, it would be a few hours after the meal of Passover. So they would have the meal of Passover about like 1 or 2 o'clock, somewhere in the afternoon. They would have that meal, everybody in their own house. And then you would want to rest, because you know how it feels after a big meal, like turkey on Thanksgiving Day, whatever. It feels, you're kind of tired. So you're going to rest. And then when nighttime comes, that night would be the best night of the whole year if you want to have an insurrection, because the Passover experiences purifies your soul. And so then the chance that God would help you overthrow the Romans or any other people that are any other nation that's controlling you at the time, that's your best chance to win. So that would be the ultimate time to overthrow the Romans if you wanted to do that. And the second reason is on Passover, you get the most people would come to Jerusalem. Jerusalem normally had about 30,000 people living there, but during the festivals, they can get an extra 100,000. So you could have 130,000 people visiting Jerusalem at that time. And in Jerusalem, they had a fort, Antonia, named after Antony, Mark Antony. Anyway, during Passover, you'd get about 2,400 soldiers would be in the city. And that's the maximum that they normally would have. There'd be 3 cohorts of 800 apiece. And then the temple maybe wasn't quite that big, but it was big for the area. And then the people would be staying in different parts of the city and outside the city. Now, as it turns out, the night that Jesus had the Passover with his disciples in Jerusalem was the actually same night that there was an insurrection. And so what happened was, I guess I need this other mic. So I got to keep this on the whole time. Yeah, yes. There was a Seder, and what happened was Jesus was with his disciples someplace in Jerusalem having his we call it the Last Supper. They had a Seder meal. Then at the end of that meal, Jesus tells his disciples to go and sell your cloaks and buy weapons, right? Then, right after that, Judas Iscariot leaves the disciples and goes and reports, this is the temple, and goes and reports to the high priest everything that had been going on. And so he reports to the high priest. The high priest reports to Pilate. Pilate sends 800 of his soldiers following Judas Iscariot to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus and his disciples go out to the Mount of Olives. Judas Iscariot knew where they were going to be, and 800 of these soldiers go out after Jesus to arrest him. And wouldn't that be the best time to have an insurrection if you wanted to have one, right? You got 800 of the 2,400 men are gone. Now there's just like 1,600 left. So this would be the ultimate time to have an insurrection if you're going to have one that whole year. This is the ultimate time, the best time. And as it turns out, there was an insurrection. Okay, so, but the insurrection lost. So however many hundreds or thousands of people revolted, tried to take over the fort. The soldiers won, the Roman soldiers won, and arrested a bunch of people, including a man named Barabbas. And the soldiers that went after Jesus arrested him, brought everybody back, and everybody got into custody. So that's why we think it happened at the same time, is because the people in custody were in custody at the same time. Jesus was in custody along with Barabbas. And they didn't really have that many prisons back then. So if you're in custody with somebody, and we have a way of punishing people by throwing them into jail for like the rest of their life, right? They didn't really do that. It's really hard to find even one or two prisons in the whole Roman Empire. It's like, what they did was they would hold them in maybe just a room for like a few hours until the punishment was set. Then they would punish. Like Jesus was arrested around in the evening, somewhere like 9, 10 o'clock in the evening or nighttime. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, he was on a cross. So they don't mess around, right? And so if Barabbas, with the rest of his cohort, the rest of his insurrectionists were in jail with Jesus, they must have revolted at the same time that Jesus was arrested. It must have all happened at the same time. Plus, there's a line in the New Testament that says, Barabbas' incident took place in the city. And Jesus, we know, was outside the city, Barabbas inside the city. So it looks like it happened at the same time. And let's see, where are we at here? Oh yeah, let's talk a little bit about, let's review a little bit on Jesus' history. Yeah, it's going to stay, I think. All right, Jesus' grandfather was Hezekiah. And he was a rebel, right? He died he was a freedom fighter. He died fighting for his people. He had a son named Judas. And Judas and this other guy, Matthew, turned out they got training and they became the best rabbis ever. They attracted people. They worked in Jerusalem and attracted people from the whole nation to come and hear them speak. If you think about, if you like study ancient civilizations, try to think of even one person in all of the history that is described as attracting people from the whole nation to come hear them speak. And that was, the historian Josephus says that was what Judas and Matthew were doing. And this being Jesus' father, like people always wonder, where did Jesus get all those ideas from? Well, if his dad is a nationally known, famous speaker, maybe some of those ideas came from his actual father. So the background to all this is earlier YouTube videos. So if you don't quite say, hey, Jeff, how do you know that's his grandfather? That's all discussed and argued for in earlier videos. I don't really have time to repeat the whole thing. So Judas has 3 sons, Jair, James, I'm just going to do initials, I think, and Simon. And his life really changes in the year 4 BCE. Okay, in the year 4 BCE, his life changes. He had pretty much a normal life, a rock star of a speaker, had 3 sons, pretty much normal. And then 4 BCE, King Herod dies. And like a lot of times what happens back then in ancient civilizations, when the king dies, everybody revolts. And the people did throughout the whole country. And Judas and Matthew included. Matthew gets caught and gets burned at the stake. Judas survives. The rest of his life, he has to take on an alias or aliases. He has to take on several aliases, and he has to hide his identity and just try to keep one step above the law. He splits his time into 3 places. Nazareth, Capernaum, and other countries. So Nazareth, looking over here, he spends his time in 3 places: Nazareth, Capernaum, and other countries. He sends his 2 youngest sons, James and Simon, to be fishermen and to be adopted by other friends of his. And so he sends them up there to be fishermen, and he can't go live in that town, because then if people saw them together, they'd be like, "Hey, I know you guys," because this guy's his face is like the most popular face in the country, right? Everybody can recognize that face. So if he's seen with his sons, they'll really be able to connect them. So he has to go like undercover. And so 2 of his sons are living there. His oldest son, Jair, moves to Capernaum with him, seemingly does. And then he has a family in Nazareth. In Nazareth, he takes on the alias Joseph. Joseph, that was a popular, there was an idea at the time, Joseph, Messiah ben Joseph, the Messiah, son of Joseph. It was a popular idea at the time, and I think that's why he picked that name for himself. So anyway, he marries Mary, and this you get from the New Testament. They have several sons, several children, at least 2 daughters, and several sons. The first one is Jesus. And then he starts replicating names that were important to him from his earlier life. He picks the name Judas. He picks the name James. He copies his own name, Joseph, as one of his sons calls Joseph, or Joseph, same thing, and then Simon. And in Capernaum, there's a tax collector that claims to be his son. His name was Matthew. In Capernaum, he chose a different, Judas, son of Hezekiah, chose a different alias. That alias was Alphaeus. And they had one son named Menahem. At least one son. So every one of these sons, Jair, James, Simon, Jesus, Judas, blah, 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 Menahem, all of them could be called Barabbas, son of the rabbi. He was a rabbi, the most famous rabbi of the time. Son of the rabbi works as a name for all of these sons. So they could be called Jair, Barabbas, etc. Yeah, there was 2 ways to say bar. There's 2 ways to say son of. You could say Ben, I think that was the Hebrew, or you could say bar, I believe that was the Aramaic. So let's talk about Jesus' last year of his life. He spent preaching and going from place to place in Galilee, this area, and healing people and preaching. That's what it says in the New Testament. When it's getting close to being the Passover, he sends his 12 disciples ahead of him to go to all the towns that they're going to walk through and heal people and preach and get people's hearts ready to serve God and for the coming kingdom of God. So he does that. They come back and report that they were able to heal people. Things went great. And he goes, great, let's go. And so they all march down, and they're stopping at all those towns and all those villages that he had sent his disciples to, and probably reenacting what he did when they were kids, picking up friends along the way. Till the time they get to Jerusalem, there was a gigantic crowd with him. And they were calling him things like, when they got to Jerusalem, they did this big parade into town. They're calling him things like Son of David, which meant Messiah, which meant the rightful king. He rode in on a donkey, like that's what was predicted for the Messiah. That week, he gets anointed by friends. There's the Last Supper. And then I already mentioned about, he tells his disciples to sell their cloaks and buy weapons, and he goes out to the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives predicted as the place from which God was going to send the deliverance. So this name, Jesus Barabbas. That was his name. And the guy that was arrested for insurrection, his name was Barabbas. But as it turns out, we actually know what his given name is. The guy that was arrested for the insurrection, his given name was Jesus. So you got two guys, both named Jesus, both named Barabbas, for being arrested for insurrection or anti-Roman activity the same day in Jerusalem. Now, the odds of something like that happening just by randomness, I love math, so I did the math on that. Let me see if it's a place. Oh, there's a little spot I could write on. So I won't spend much time on the math because that really makes people fall asleep. But I'll just give you the formula. So in one day, the odds of we won't count one of the two men, we'll just count the odds of finding one person like this, right? In one day, this is the odds of finding one person with the following names. Like the name Jesus is found in this book, and it's 4% of the time. So the odds of finding a Jesus in a group of people is 0.04. Oops, drawing the 4 in a weird way. Okay, hope you can still read that. All right, and the odds of finding the name Barabbas, somebody named Barabbas, that was almost 1% of the people had that name. Okay, and the odds of an insurrection happening in any one particular day, this is found in the writings of Josephus. It happened basically 4 times in 40,000 days, one time per 10,000. So that is 0.00. One time. So when you do the math on this, you get one chance in 32 million that it was just by random that those two guys had the exact same name, being arrested for insurrection. And so I'm going to switch to this. So you have to say it wasn't a random thing. There's a reason. There's a reason for it. And what I think the reason is that Menahem had a brother named Jesus. Back to the other mic. So I think the reason that makes sense to me is right here in Capernaum, when Judas, son of Hezekiah, took on the alias Alphaeus, they had 2 sons. One named Menahem, which I didn't even write in here, and the other one named Jesus. And it would make sense that this guy, remember he repeats names all the time? He copies, all these names had been repeated, except for Jesus, Jair. Now, Jair is living with him in the same town, so I think that's why he didn't repeat that name. And so Jesus was not repeated, and the only other name that wasn't repeated was Menahem. So all these names were repeated except for Jesus, so it makes sense that he named the first baby, right, the firstborn Jesus, like he did in Nazareth, naming the firstborn Jesus. And that would it actually makes it easier for him to remember the names of his kids, right? He has 2 babies, they'll call them both Jesus, whatever town he's in, he has, it's easier to keep track of that way. That's something I would do. And also Jesus meant, it meant the deliverer of Israel. It was named after, it's the same name as Joshua, and Joshua was the person who freed the whole country and turned basically the country from Canaan into Israel. So that was the biggest hero, military hero in the Israelite history of a victory. That was Joshua, or Jesus, same name. So that's why he picked that name. Let's see. So the thing is, I'm going to switch mics. So basically, it looks like Jesus and this guy Barabbas, who did the insurrection, it looks like they were connected. Like the thing, for sure, it seemed like they were brothers, half brothers. And that alone right there would it should blow our minds, because that means Jesus' movement, which is supposed to be all about peace and kindness and that kind of thing, is connected to this military action to overthrow the Romans. It never says anywhere that Jesus used violence. He is quoted as saying, people say I've come to bring peace. I'm not come to bring peace. I'm come to bring the sword. So that's a quote. Whether he said that or not, that has to be argued by people smarter than me. But it's a quote. So it looks like some people related to Jesus were involved in an insurrection, And that should get us really thinking, or maybe rethinking the whole thing about what was really happening that last week when Jesus was in Jerusalem. What was the plan? What was going on? And so we have to talk about Judas Iscariot, which we won't do now, but he'll come into the picture in a future speech here. We'll be talking about him. It adds to the strength of the argument that there was this insurrection and Jesus was connected to it, and that's why all these things kind of line up. So thanks so much for listening to all this. Is there any questions for anybody? Okay, let me grab the mic. Okay.
Yeah, this is pretty shocking in a way. So I was wondering if you have resources that you could make available for where you're getting this information.
Yeah, right. So there's the primary sources would be Josephus, the writings of Josephus, and the other YouTube videos that we've had that have done here have all the background for, like, the proof that Hezekiah is Jesus' grandfather, and the argument that Judas, the son of Hezekiah, is Jesus' actual father. That's all been argued in previous things. So if you want to see like resources, you could read the tome of Josephus' writing. It's really thick, but there's that, the New Testament, and there are a few people that actually believe that Jesus is the son of this Hezekiah, grandson of this Hezekiah guy. Christopher Lawson is one. He's a scholar. There's a few books out on this subject, but it's just a handful of people. And so you could read their books. One of them's called Jesus the Nazarene, and that person also believes that part of the story. So I would check the videos that we put out on YouTube, because that's pretty much the only place. What I've just told you today, I've never heard in public ever, or in written form. This is like pretty much a new idea that's just been broached right now.
Okay.
Could you? Thanks. Hank.
You mentioned a quote. Jesus talked about a sword, and I feel like I've heard that somewhere, but I'm wondering, is that in an apocryphal book, or is it actually in one of the Gospels?
Yeah, it's in one of the Gospels. Yeah, it says people say Jesus. People say I've come to bring peace. I've not come to bring peace. I've come to bring the sword. But that's the hardest thing of this whole thing, is trying to figure out what Jesus actually said. Right? That's like, this is the easy stuff, because you could follow like names and you could do probability and stuff, but what he said is the hardest. But there's the criteria you use to find out what he said. The one I use, and most scholars will use this, it's called the criteria of embarrassment. If it's something that the people the followers of Jesus would not say about their leader, because it would be embarrassing, then it's probably true. And that definitely would be something the Christians that were following Jesus would not say, because they wouldn't make that up. Because if the Romans saw that in one of their books, which they actually could have seen it, but it's risky, very risky to say that and to put it out there. So it's the likelihood that he actually said it is higher because of that. Any more questions? Great. Well, thanks. Oh, go ahead, Hank.
Just a tiny question. So people spoke both Hebrew and Aramaic?
Yes.
Yeah.
They spoke Aramaic, and the educated people would have known Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Great. So what we're going to do, Margaret Hurlbert is going to be next, and she's going to talk about sea otters survive. Thanks, Margaret.
Are you gonna?
Yeah. I just grabbing the mic. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So, first I wanted to, or are you ready with that? We had a couple trips to Morro Bay the last 2 years, and Jeff and I happened along some sea otters in this inner harbor, and they were like 10 feet from us. I mean, they were just doing their thing, and we didn't realize, you go there and they're really close. So I started to get interested in them, and so I started learning about them. And one source I found was seaottersavvy.org, and these are naturalists, scientists that put this together. Anyway, that doesn't matter. So basically, I'm going to talk about their biology and how they were hunted and what happened to them over time. And so, first of all, I'm getting distracted by the video. Don't you just put the thing in there and just click on it?
You want to go to the next scene?
No, I mean, it shouldn't be with lots of different windows.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you do that?
Yeah, I can't find it. Okay, I'll find it.
There it is. Can you scroll down? I just wanted to show a picture of a sea otter.
I gotta go escape first to get to that thing.
It's right there. Just
No,
a different tab.
yeah, I'm looking for. I almost there.
Same picture.
Oh, well, I'll just start talking and then I'll let him figure it out. Oh, so anyway, when did sea otters start going into the water? 5 million years ago. It wasn't that long ago compared to whales. They started diverging into a water living thing 40 million years ago, 8 times longer. And seals 20 million years ago. So 4 times longer. So basically, they haven't been evolving that long to be in water, and they haven't evolved to have blubber like the whales and the seals. Blubber keeps animals warm when they're in the cold water. So sea otters had other ideas. They had fur, and they evolved to have really thick fur. Anyone want to guess how many hairs per square inch they have on their, how many? Okay. Nope, it's a lot higher. 1 million. They have the thickest fur of any mammal. And they also have outer hairs that keep the water from, just kind of makes it slide off their back, and their fur's kind of oily. So what they do is they're always fluffing up their fur, like they have ectoparasites, but they don't because their fur's too thick for that. They're always fluffing up their fur because they're trying to make a lot of bubbles inside, and it catches air, and that acts as an insulator, and the water doesn't even touch their skin. It's so thick, their fur is so thick. So that's how they survive in the cold water. And compared to seals, seals have blubber. It's actually better to have blubber because then when you dive, the blubber keeps you warm. But for sea otters, diving is kind of cold because their fur gets all matted when they're diving, so they don't have that air protection. So maybe in the next 5 or 10 million years, they'll get blubber. It's sort of like going back in time, sort of seeing what whales may have done and what seals might have done as they were evolving. So they do have a lot, and they also have they have flippers in back, like a seal with webbed feet so they can swim. In the front, they have paws, they're in the weasel family. So they didn't come from little seals. They aren't little seals. And they have retractable claws on their paws so they can manipulate objects. So when they go, there's one with its baby. They keep their babies on their tummies till they're like 6 months old. And they fluff up their baby's fur, and they go hunting and give them shells and crabs to eat. Anyway, so all these interlocking under fur and the insulation really helps them. They also have really thick bones full of air, and it makes them float. And they have They have better sense of smell than eyesight, they think, because when they can smell things, when the wind's coming their way, they leave. Anyway, they live around 20 years, and they forage like 12 hours a day, because they have to have enough food, like 25% of their body weight, to stay warm. There's one in the waves. And then they like to live in coastal, near kelp beds and eelgrass. I'll tell you more about that later. So the history, can you go to the map? Just click on the little arrow. There's a map coming up. Just keep clicking. Click, click. Oh, no. There's another map. It's a drawing map. Oh, maybe it's not in here. The map might be in another one. Anyway, I'll just talk a little bit about where they started out. They started out they ranged all the way from Japan up into the Bering Sea, Alaska, and all the way down the coast of North America, all the way down to Baja, California, halfway down Baja Peninsula. And that was, their past. And then what happened is they became popular, their fur pelts became really popular to wear as coats, because they're such thick fur. So Chinese aristocrats wanted fur pelt coats, and they would pay $100 in the 1700s for one pelt. So the Russians started hunting them. So in the 1700s, they had probably world population was kind of a wide range, 150,000 to 300,000 sea otters, sort of a broad range. And then they were hunted by indigenous people then, but they didn't lose their numbers. They still were abundant. But once they started hunting them in 1741, and the Russians started hunting them in Alaska then. And they have sold them to China and Europe, the pelts. And in 150 years, the population dropped to 2,000 sea otters worldwide. And they were almost extinct when people decided to stop hunting them. They signed the International Fur Seal Treaty in 1911. So after that, they started coming back gradually. And now the map isn't there, but it doesn't matter. They were in 13 sort of separate colonies that came to about 125,000 sea otters. So they came back. So it's actually a positive story in some ways, but they still, down here in California, though, where they used to be abundant, they used to have 16,000 to 30,000 sea otters along California coast. And now there's 3,000. So they never really came back all the way. Up in Alaska, though, there's quite a number of them, like maybe most of them live up there. But down here, I don't know why they just aren't doing quite as well. And they try to relocate them, but they go back. They try to go back to where they were. They aren't really fond of being moved because they're really into where they live. So the Russians, I'll talk more about the Russians later. Let me just check something. So there's 3 distinct subspecies, and we have the southern sea otter, and then there's one that's up in the Aleutian Islands that's doing well. But we have fewer, but we have little groups of them. Like Morro Bay has 40 sea otters. They used to have 10, and now they've increased in the last 20 years to 40. Okay, so females, do you want to show some more slides? Or we could show the video now. Why don't we do that? Do you know how to show the video? Probably not. Okay. We took a couple of videos in Morro Bay. I just wanted to show those because it shows their behavior. And no, they're from the seaottersavvy.org. Oh, there. Okay. Why don't we watch Oh, it isn't. Okay. Okay, so this is a couple sea otters that were diving for food, and I don't know what it is. Looks like a big pink rubber band. So if you can figure out what they're eating, I don't know what they're eating. So here's one. He's chewing on his rubber band. And there's going to be another one sneaking up on him in a second. I hope. Yeah, so where's the other one? Come on. So, like I say, they were right next to us. Okay, the other one grabbed it. Did you see that? So they're tussling over it. And then they each get some, I think. Let's see. I think they're each chewing after that. So that's some of their feeding behavior. See that thing? It's sort of weird. And, okay, that's probably... Well, I mean, you can keep showing it while I talk. So they go to the bottom of the ocean. Well, they dive down, they grab a rock. Sometimes they grab a rock and they pound whatever it is, like a clam or they eat crabs and they crack it open when they're at the surface and they bang on them with the rock. And they do use tools. They're one of the few mammals that use tools. And they don't keep the same rock. I've heard various things, but that's a misconception. They get a new rock each time. They have little pockets under their arms that they fold. The fur is really folded so they can carry food up in it. And that's okay, that's enough of that one. Can I show the other video? Okay, so we also took a video when we first arrived and saw them. We were so lucky because we got to see a really unusual interaction. Let's see. It's okay. There it is. Okay, so just to give you, before you turn it on, I want to talk about it. There's going to be a baby sea otter squealing, a mom with the baby. Then you'll see another sea otter come up to them, and the mom kind of pushes it away. Then you'll see the baby swimming off to be with the other male. He comes over to play. And then he starts squealing, and then the mom goes rushing over and grabs him and comes back. Okay, let's see if... Okay, so... Is there sound? We need sound. How do you do sound? You have to have sound. I don't know how to do it. Oh, okay. That would be good because the baby's squealing and stuff. The baby's supposed to be squealing. Oh, well. Well, there's the other sea otter. It's probably a male. And so she's kind of... Oh, there's the baby squealing. It's like, squeal, squeal. And then... and the mom... The baby's the one on the right. I think the mom was trying to wean the baby, or it was hungry, and she was diving for food, and the baby wants food. And there's the other sea otters nearby. And then it's kind of a long video, but I just thought, let's see. So she's eating some kind of clam or shellfish. And the other ones are hovering around. They probably want some of the food. Or maybe they're just playing nearby. Okay, the baby's going over. And then you'll see. Let's see. They're playing. They do sparring. But the baby isn't quite big enough to do it with these bigger males, I guess. He's upset. Mommy. So then, where's the mom? Oh, the mom already did? I missed it. She went and got it. So that's what you can see if you go to Morro Bay. You can see things like that. Pretty amazing, huh? Oh, I forgot to mention, one other thing that they do is they drink seawater. Like other sea mammals can't just drink seawater, they get their water from their food, but sea otters can't have kidneys that can get the salt out of the water and they can actually drink it. Thought that was a good habit, a good thing. And they eat crabs, sea urchins, sea stars, and all kinds of things. Let's see. They're called a keystone species. They eat sea urchins, which eat kelp. So when they eat the sea urchins, the kelp can thrive. So, and also with eelgrass, the eelgrass has these little snails that they're green and they clean the eelgrass. Well, sea otters eat the crabs that eat the snails. So it helps the snails clean the eelgrass. So it does better with the sea otters there. So they help their environment, and they're still endangered. They're called threatened under Endangered Species Act because they have low overall numbers, a limited range, and the threat of oil spills. So the Exxon Valdez oil spill killed 2,000 of them. They die really fast if they get oil on them because they try licking it off because they're always grooming and they get poisoned. And it also makes them cold because all of a sudden their fur flattens out. So they can't make it in an oil spill. They need to eat 25% of their body weight to stay warm and healthy. If you bother them and they have to dive and go away from you, like if you're in a kayak and they're scared and they have to go under the water, it sometimes threatens them because they don't have enough energy to do all that extra stuff. They need to be doing what they're doing and not disturbed because they're on a fine balance of having enough enough energy to keep warm. So you should keep your distance if you're in a kayak. So they are kind of vulnerable not having blubber, but they also have bounced back, at least slowly. And, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the biggest cause of death to sea otters in the California coast? No. Yes. Great white shark bites. So the great white shark has, the number of them killed by great white sharks in California has dramatically increased to as much as 60% of known mortalities recently. I don't know exactly why. They said maybe they're sampling the otters while looking for seals, and just trying to find a seal, and they keep biting sea otters. And let's see, some places, though, the sea otters are at the top of their carrying capacity. That term means the number of animals that can live there because of the amount of food, shelter, and water. So they are at their peak level in San Luis Obispo, and some areas have, quite a number. And on Moss Landing, the males live in a group there, and sometimes they haul out. They actually sit on the beach and rest, and they warm up, and they can stay there for a while. And they do that when they feel safe. So I don't know how much they did it before man came along, but I took a class years ago where they said they used to be all over the beaches, but I'm not sure if that's true. And let's see. Okay, so on to the history part. Wanted to give a little more history. The Russians were the main people who hunted them. In the 1700s, the Spanish came to San Francisco and they made the Presidio. They built it, and they built the Mission Dolores, but they didn't hunt sea otters. They didn't need any pelts. They were warm enough, So when the Russians came, they arrived in a boat called the Juno, and they were coming in on their ship, and the people in the Presidio used a bullhorn and said, "Who are you?" basically in 1806, and they said, "We're here for food." See, the Russians had the Sitka, Alaska's where they had their main fur trading company and where they did a lot of their hunting, but they didn't have enough land. It was too cold to make crops, so they were all getting hungry and scurvy, and so they came down to find a place to grow vegetables and fruits. So they were there to get food. So they said, "Oh, we're here to get food." So they came down to the shoreline, the Spaniards, and they talked to them in Latin because it's the only language that they could communicate between the Russians and the Spanish. And then they said, "Oh, you need food." So they gave them a bunch of oxen, sheep, onions, garlic, and cabbage. So anyway, they gave them a bunch of food, and they served them dinner in their presidio on silver platters and all this. So then Count Rezanor, a Russian count on the ship, saw Don Luis's younger sister, Dona Concepcion, and she was really lovely, and he fell in love with her, but he wanted to marry her, but unfortunately he died before he could because the Pope hadn't given him permission to marry a non-Catholic. So he never got his wish. But anyway, the arrival of the Russians spurred the Spanish to establish colonies. They hadn't built any colonies yet, so they started hurriedly making missions because they were a little worried about the Russians, coming and making their own. And actually, in Fort Ross, which is kind of north of Bodega Bay, the Russians did establish a little place to raise fruit and vegetables, and they were there about 30 years, and the local Indian tribe people were employed, and so employed. They worked with them, and so did some indigenous people from Alaska came down. So they were raising vegetables for the Sitka, Alaska place up in Alaska where they needed vegetables. So in 1821, following Mexico's War of Independence against Spain, the Russia Tsar Alexander I closed the waters of the Pacific Northwest and California to Europe, the US, and Mexico. He said to stay 100 miles from the coast of Russian America. That's what it was called. So this caused the US President James Monroe to issue the Monroe Doctrine, calling, quote, any further European colonization of the Western Hemisphere an act of aggression against the US. So the Russians were impeded by this, and Fort Ross was unsuccessful due to massive overhunting of sea otters, causing a collapse of the population there. So they sold Fort Ross to John Sutter of Sutter's Fort in Sacramento and left around 1840, never to be seen again. That's it. Questions about sea otters? Does anyone have a question?
I just had a little question. I've always heard that like all these animals that are in the water, that they were animals that actually went from land into water and then they gradually changed. Like I've heard that like a whale is from a bear. So do you know anything about? What was that?
I heard it was from the hippopotamus.
Okay. Do you know anything about an otter? Like how an otter? You don't know. Okay.
I know they're in the weasel family, and that's about. I didn't learn which animal turned into a sea otter. Sorry. I wish I did.
All right, well, thanks very much, Margaret. That was great.
Thank you. It was fun. What? No, after that, there's several acts, the Mammal Protection Act, and that one in 1911, they stopped hunting them then. Yeah, it was an international treaty. At least this population, there's 13 other species around the world, but for this group in Alaska and California.
The one that the Greenpeace protected, that's the white ones.
There's a white sea otter.
Is that otter? What is that? It's
Beluga whales?
no, the little white critters. They look like that. Is
Those fur seal.
baby seal
The Seal Act covered the fur seal up in Alaska, the ones that the Greenpeace put dye on so people wouldn't use the pelts. That was under the 1911 Act too, so they stopped. Wait a minute, that can't be right. I think I read that though. In 1911, it was called the Fur Seal Treaty. There must have been something else that was being hunted that Greenpeace, in the 60s, 70s were helping. They must have been, I think another country wasn't abiding by the Fur Seal Act. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Oh. Oh, nice. Right. Oh, Joanna?
Are there freshwater otters as well?
Yes, there's river otters, and they live in rivers, and I don't know much about them. I haven't looked into them yet. I've seen them in Tilden Park, though.
I assume they're distantly related.
They're related. Yeah, they're probably pretty related. Oh, sure. Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
You had mentioned that their population was down to 2,000 and then came back.
Yeah.
And then you had also mentioned that they eat critters that are good, that like basically restores the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have there been any like identified habitats that have been restored because of the otters coming back?
I don't know, but probably there are. Because, wherever they help the kelp and they help the eelgrass, so I'm sure wherever they are, they've helped it. But there's a whole thing about sea urchins right now. They've lost their, they usually have a lot of roe inside them, and I read an article in the paper recently that they're not getting enough roe, and the people who used to fish them aren't getting enough, they just throw them away. So there's a lot going on with kelp, sea urchins, and sea otters. I think I'll do part 2 on sea urchins next.
Great. Thanks so much, Margaret Hurlbert. That was very nice to hear all that. Yeah. Yay. One-handed clap. So Hank Pellissier is next. He's going to talk about women's liberation. And I've heard something about a contest. I heard there might be some kind of a contest or something. It is a contest. Okay. We'll see how we do.
Okay. Welcome to our Battle of the Genders contest tonight. But first we need to establish the teams. And I'm not going to assume any pronouns at all. So I just need to know who here is a man. Okay. And who here is a woman? I'm not assuming anything. Also, I don't believe in the binary gender theory. So who here is non-binary? Okay, that's good. Who here is gender fluid? Is there anybody here that's gender fluid? Well, if you suddenly start to feel gender fluid and you're switching from like a man to a woman during this contest, let me know so that I can score your vote correctly. Okay? And, pardon me? You're going to do that. Okay. And I need to know also, does anybody here, I'm also neurodiversity sympathetic. Does anybody here have multiple personality disorder so that you might vote twice and different genders? Anybody going to do that? It's fine if you've never done it and you do it. Just let me know. Another question. Does anybody here ever wake up in the middle of the night and wish you had the genitalia of a penguin, asking for a friend? Martha? I mean Margaret? No? Okay. And so I think we're ready to go. Okay. What amendment to the U.S. Constitution gave women the right to vote? 19th. Aha! 3 votes for women. I am keeping track of this. 3 votes for women, all women. Okay, next question is, in what year did American women win the right to vote? You dudes are getting killed. You are this is going to be a Lysistrata kind of evening. Okay, which country was the first to grant women the right to vote? Ooh. Finland, no, it's New Zealand. Which nation was the last nation to give women the right to vote? No, the last nation to give women the right to vote was Saudi Arabia. What U.S. state gave women the right to vote first? What U.S. state? No. This is a surprise answer here. What? No, but that's closer. Closer. Wyoming. Because they wanted women to move there. So there's a little perk if you move there. That's the reason. A bunch of cowboys wanted cowgirls. What was the last state to give women the right to vote? The last state. Yeah, close, but not. But Florida, you're in the right region, the Deep South. Mississippi. Oh, a man is on the scoreboard. It's now 5-1. Okay, I had given up on the guys. Okay, some tough questions. Who was the feminist leader of England, leading the suffragette movement there? That's a tough one. Pardon? Oh my gosh! Joanna's got her own category. She's nailing out all of it. Wow. Okay, that's correct. Who founded the National Organization of Women? Whew. Oh my God, you guys. 7-1. 7-1. We're going to have to do male whatever, pride next time. Sports. Name a Unitarian woman who was an early suffragette, okay? A Unitarian woman. Joanna, I'm listening. Well, you could be correct, but I have Louisa May Alcott. Okay. Who wrote Vindication of the Rights of Women? Pardon me? That's correct. 8-1. You guys have to mount a comeback here. Who wrote The Second Sex? French woman. Oh my God. 9-1. Okay. What's the name of the town in New York State where Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton started the USA suffragette movement? Seneca Falls. 10-1. Name a deaf, mute, and blind woman who was an important American suffragette. Helen Keller. I'm not hearing anything from this side of the room. Okay. What religion allowed women to inherit property before Christianity? What? Muslim, yes. Rosie the Liberator in World War II. Rosie the Riveter in World War II symbolized women's help in building war machinery. What city did Rosie theoretically work in? I heard a guy over here, he's getting half a vote because the women were talking too. Okay, we're going to have some questions here that a guy's going to know. What nation has elected the most female presidents? Not easy. This is not an easy question. No. It's going to be negatives on those. Okay. Argentina. What nation elected the most female prime ministers? I said presidents first, now it's prime ministers. One of them recently retired. No, one of them recently spoke in San Francisco. New Zealand is the answer, yes. Here's one. Name the warrior queen who fought successfully against the Romans as the Empress of Palmyra. Pardon me? No, she was in Ireland. It's a tough question. No, her name was Zenobia. It's my daughter's name. This is a little offbeat. Why are female hyena bigger than male hyenas? You know the answer. Go ahead. Yeah, why are female hyena bigger than male hyenas? They just are. You are going to lose all the women's votes if you don't close your mouth.
So they can eat first.
No, so they can keep their husbands away from eating the babies. Yes, and here's the last question. Name a celebrity who supported the Free the Nipple movement. I'm looking for a female celebrity because the male celebrities were pretty supportive, I've heard. But name a female celebrity who supported the Free the Nipple movement. Miley Cyrus, no surprise there. Chelsea Handler and Chrissy Teigen. Okay, score was women 13, men 1.5.
That was pretty rough. You men out there feeling a little bit embarrassed like me right now? So next is going to be, let me think here. It's going to be Mike Kerr, and he's going to be talking about, I titled this talk, I Stood at Standing Rock. But I don't know, he probably has a better title than that. So, but before you come, Mike, let me see a show of hands. Do you guys want like a 5-minute break? And then we'll do Mike and then the last two speeches. Anybody want to do that? Why don't you just throw your hand up and we could do that? All right, you got 2 or 3. So let's take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll hear Mike Kerr. And after Mike Kerr will be Tina T talking about the trees at People's Park. Okay, thank you. It's Christine. You have pictures too? Exactly. So she could just do like this. Thanks. I just left the mic on. Just go ahead.
Okay, so. All right, here's yours. It's a slideshow, but you can just page through it. This. You ever used this before?
I don't use it.
Okay, so you just kind of slide it to there, and then just tap anywhere.
So I'll go to the point.
Just tap down. There you go.
I'm going to go back.
You go to that one.
This one. Okay, so realize you have
Another way would be just to make that full screen. Let's do that. That's going to be easier. There, now you can just use the arrows. So that's the beginning. And then just the order.
Actually, while I'm talking, first maybe I can go to the last one. The last picture. Up there, that's a good one. Yeah, I think it's good when I first started talking.
Okay. So you want that first. Change that. So 19, I'm going to make that 1.
Yeah, so I can have that one on my first day. Because I'm going to go through a little bit of history.
So that's first. And then just goes to that. Same order we had.
Should I just use this one?
This one's probably easier, then you don't have to hold it. And this could be up there if you want it.
I'll just click it.
Okay. Just the arrows, left, right, forward, backwards, see the list.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks again, Brett Torres on piano. It's very nice. And we're Mike Kerr's about to come up here, and he's going to talk about his adventures at Standing Rock when that protest was going on. Okay, Mike Kerr, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm more of a researcher and not a public speaker, so bear with me. I have the picture here. How many people were involved at one time or another with the Dakota Access Pipeline protests? Nobody? Really? I thought it would be everybody. Okay. Well, I was going to say then, how many people went to Standing Rock? Okay. Well, I wanted to give a little bit of history of, real brief of Standing Rock, Sioux tribe. They cover part of North and South Dakota on the eastern side, and it forms the Standing Rock Reservation. So the land is like 3,500 square miles, which they say is twice the size of the state of Delaware. So it's pretty big. But the population, can anybody guess what the population of Standing Rock Reservation is? Well, this is a 2010 census. I think it may be a little bit crazy, but it was 8,200. Very small for twice the size of Delaware. So it was, and the reservation there is part of the Great Sioux Nation. And the Sioux people were more nomad, and they were very decentralized. And then in 1868, the Sioux were forced to sign a treaty, Fort Laramie Treaty, that pushed them all to the east side of the Missouri River. But still, in the area that they had were the Black Hills, which they considered one of their most sacred lands. And so this is in the late 60s, 1860s. In 1864, in direct violation of the Fort Laramie Treaty, General George Custer and his 7th Cavalry came to the Black Hills area. And apparently gold had been discovered. So this was the beginning of a gold rush to the Black Hills. And the Sioux spiritual leader was Sitting Bull. And Sitting Bull led the thing to, we're not going to sell our land, and we're not going to rent it to you. And this began the Great Sioux Wars of 1876 and 77. And the Lakota Sioux and the Northern Cheyenne fought in this battle. And then we're all probably aware of the more famous battle, which was the Battle of Little Bighorn, where the Sioux actually won a battle defeating General George Custer and all his men. I don't know, how many people have seen the movie Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman? That's a great movie. I love it. It's humorous, but I think it's fairly respectable for the Native American people, and it kind of showed how bad the white settlers were. And then in 1877, right after this war, in which the Sioux were basically defeated, the U.S. government took the Black Hills away from the Sioux Nation. So this was, something that was very painful. Then, going up to February 1890, the government decided to break the Lakota Treaty again, and this time they wanted to break up the Sioux Nation, and they split it into like 4 or 5 different reservations, and they're trying to break up the spirit and the culture of the Sioux people. And Wikipedia says that it was conform the Indians to the white man's way, and peacefully if they will, or forcibly if they must. So the people were being treated really bad, and as I said, they were used to living on the prairies, hunting bison, and living in teepees, and And now they were being forced to join into a farming culture. And the land there in that area is not very conducive to farming. And so it kind of failed on them right away, and their children were being taken away from them, being sent to boarding schools to learn the white man's way. So these were beginning of some really bad times, but right away there was like starvation that was happening because there was no more bison and the farming wasn't working. So the people started this ghost dance ritual. And I'm not clear about what it was, but apparently the Bureau of Land Affairs decided this was very dangerous, like the people were getting back together again. And what happened in December 15, 1890, Sitting Bull was arrested, and then in a skirmish he was killed. A couple weeks later, the 7th Cavalry claimed that they were trying to disarm the Lakota people, and they killed 300 people, including women and children, at the now famous Wounded Knee Massacre. Okay, so the Native Americans were suffering all these years. And so I jump up to 1960, and the Army Corps of Engineers decides to build 5 dams on the Missouri River. And a lot of them flooded a lot of the reservation area, forcing a lot of Native Americans to again move out of areas that they had been living in for quite a few years at then. And so that situation existed until we get to 2016 and the Dakota Access Pipeline. And what happened was it was going to be originally near the state capital of Bismarck, crossing the Missouri River. And this is down a little below the reservation area. But the white people of the area did not want their water polluted, so they had the route of the pipeline rerouted down to the Standing Rock Reservation. And this was the only water supply for the Native Americans there, and so they of course wanted to resist. And on April 1st of 2016, a Native woman, LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, she was an elder member, but she had owned property there, and she set up her property and established a sacred stone camp. And this became the cultural preservation and spiritual resistance area to the Dakota Access Pipeline. What was really significant about this, after being dispersed a real lot and not having a lot of cohesion, all of a sudden we had a gathering of the largest gathering of Native American tribes in the past 100 years. And they came together, and by September there was 300 federally recognized Native American tribes that were involved at the Standing Rock Reservation there. And there was like 3,000 to 4,000 resistance people that were residing in the area of the Sacred Stone Camp, and then even more, several thousand more on weekends. So remember I said that there was like 8,000 people in 2010. Well, this is like 6 years later, and now we've got almost half of that number of people living in a small part of the reservation, resisting the pipeline. because of all the action that was going on and everything, in September 3rd of 2016, a private security firm was hired to come in, and they started bulldozing part of the pipeline route through that was subject to a pending injunction motion, and they didn't seem to care. And this involved tearing up some Native American graves and burial artifacts. So it further aggravated the situation. And then a few days later, the federal government denied the tribe's request for an injunction to stop this. But fortunately, the EPA, the DOJ, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation put an order in and halted the construction of the pipeline until there would be further environmental assessments taking place. So this struggle went on, and there was a lot of action going in, which and I think maybe you are aware of some of it, but so this comes to December 2nd, 2016, and that's where I come in. They said there was approximately 2,000 United States military veterans that came in support of the activists, and they were going to pledge to set up a human shield to protect the protesters from police. Now myself, I never really saw that many veterans. I came with two other people that were not veterans, and I actually stayed in the campground, whereas most of the veterans were staying outside in a hotel. And one day there was, an action where veterans came, and I only saw a few hundred, but the campground was pretty big, and we marched up to the thing. But let me get some slides here. Well, here's some of the actions that were happening during the summer. Oh, you could use this if you want. It's on. Hello. This is some of the actions that were happening during the summer of 2016. They had boat blockades and actions, and they marched on the road to where the pipeline was trying to be built. And they call themselves the protectors, some of them, and then Mini Weconi. That's water is life. I think that's the correct way. So that was kind of the theme, because the whole action was to protect their water from a pipeline that was probably going to leak a lot. And then, like I said, there was a lot of tribes, so all the tribes had their own flags. So they were all lined up, flags on the hillside. And here's another where they're massing and blocking the road. This is all things happened in the summer before I came. And that one didn't show up. That was a little map to show you where the reservation is. But it's North and South Dakota there. Okay. So when they got the word about veterans, I decided I'd go, and I was able to get a couple of friends, Maro and what's his name? I wrote his name down. I keep forgetting. Devin. Yeah, Devin. Okay, these were my two, when we drove, nonstop from the Bay Area all the way to Standing Rock. And we stopped on the way and got a lot of equipment at a surplus store, and it's a good thing we did, because it was pretty cold up there, and we got a lot of warm clothes and stuff. And then when we came in, this is what it kind of looked like. So there was a lot of tents and a lot of little campers and stuff, and a lot of snow on the ground. It was still somewhat nice then. This was my first day there. I was only going to be there like 3 days. Okay, and then they had little these domed huts and some meetings going on of people to get to know what to do. These aren't necessarily all veterans here. There's a lot of other people. Like I said, there was 3,000 to 4,000 people living on the camp. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Fortunately, Mauro was a Native American from Brazil, and he talked to some of the Native Americans there. And so we got to park right by a teepee, and it was such an ideal spot. I didn't realize at the time, but there was a big cooking tent nearby. We had the big dome on the other side of us, and then the porta potties were real close by. Not too close, but they were close. So this became pretty important at some point. I thought I had more pictures, but so here we are meeting, and there I am, kind of dressed up in some new military clothes that were a lot warmer. We're inside the dome there, a lot of meetings. And then here's the tent three of us were sleeping in. And this is just before the major snowstorm. I mean, there was still a lot of snow there, but by the next day, the tent caved in. There was so much snow. So we ended up sleeping in the dome, where a lot of people did. And what happened was the storm was, and the snowstorm was so bad that no more supplies could get in. People couldn't get out, and so we were running out of supplies, and the porta potties got overflowing because there's nobody to empty them. So if you can imagine when it's really cold out and there's a porta potty and it's frozen, and it's solid, it was pretty nasty at that point. And I don't have pictures of it, but during this, I think it was the second day I was there, they asked for volunteers to go into the local town, and we got on a bus and we went there, and what happened was people from all over the world were sending in supplies to help, and it was unbelievable. It was like a big warehouse full of stuff, and we had to open packages and sort things out, and there was coats and gloves and hand warmers and toe warmers and shoes and blankets and tents and heaters and just about, and besides a lot of food and stuff. So it was pretty amazing. And there must have been like 15, 20 of us just that few hours that we were there sorting out things. And then they would bring stuff into the campground, and there was certain buildings that you could go in and get things. That's how we got our tent. We went in, we said we need a tent, they gave us a tent. So it was a very communal working situation. There was no, you can't have this, you're taking too much. No, and then they had a series of not just one, but there was 4 or 5 cooking buildings, that had been set up so people could eat, and people would volunteer. I'm sure there were some people that were, professional at it, but most of us were volunteering to help out in the thing, and I did that one meal. So it was, I felt like I was at least doing something. Let's see. Yeah, there's one of the tents for the cooking. And you could also go in there and rest a little bit, and it was a little bit warm, but it turned out it was really great that I was able to bring my Prius into the area, and it was real close by because we used it a number of times just to get warm. because there was no other place to really get warm on the site. And there's one, I forget what you call those. Yurk, yeah. And I got to go into one, not this one, but so they were amazing. And then, when I left, what happened was, after 3 days I'd been there, when supplies were bad, they were snowed in and everything. So the Native Americans asked, please, if you're don't have some importance to be here, could you maybe leave? So I left with Devin, and Mauro stayed to do some more stuff. And I played, at this time I played my senior citizen role, and I let Devin put on these snow chains and take them off. Well, I sat in a warm car. Sometimes being a senior helps, because it was cold. And let's see. Okay. And then, of course, there was a lot of protests, during that whole year, 2016. And this was a picture of one of them in San Francisco. I'm surprised nobody came. Okay. Now let me see. What I've done. Okay. There's a little bit more now to get up to date. Well, in recent times here, some aggressive corporations have decided to attack pristine areas and Mother Earth, and a lot of them are Native American areas. So they're also attacking allies. So I think people are aware that Greenpeace was sued, and they had a trial, and Greenpeace was found guilty. And this is in Mandan, North Dakota, okay? Leveled a blistering $660 million verdict against Greenpeace. And this was for their part in Standing Rock resistance against the Dakota Access Pipeline. Well, I guess most people knew that Greenpeace was hardly barely there, they were just basically supportive. But apparently the corporations wanted to set an example and attack Greenpeace. Now, this just happened recently, in March 19th, the ruling, but it's going to be challenged, and it's more than likely going to, they're going to be successful because it was kind of ridiculous to begin with, but it was in the heart of the area in North Dakota there that don't like the Native Americans and want to kick them out and take their land and stuff. Let's see. Anyway, this is part of the whole environmental thing too. Corporations are using legal means to go after, progressives in the environmental area, and now we see even more areas. And they're using these called SLAPs, strategic lawsuits against public participation, to try to silence people. And what it is the companies can afford to file these lawsuits, even though they're meaningless and they're not going to win, but they force other organizations and people to have to spend money they don't have to at least fight them. So this is basically a way of silencing the people in the movement. And we recently had the COP29 conference, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and Trump said that, plan to roll back the Biden-Harris administration progress on climate emergency, which I never thought was very good to begin with. And Trump's thing is drill, baby, drill. So we're in for some bad times here. And the pipelines as the Native Americans feared, have leaked a number of times, and the most recent one was on April 8th, and 3,500 barrels of oil spilled onto a lot of agricultural land on the reservation. The other thing is I'm more of a researcher, so I have set up a flyer I'll pass out to people here, but if you're online or viewing this in the future, it's on my website, Creating Better World, and you go to cur2020.com. That's the best way to get to it. That was my congressional website that I used, and it's still active. I'm doing a lot of stuff on it. And if you go to, it'll be real easy. You'll see it. Scientists now give us 10 years to prevent a runaway climate catastrophe. Okay, you'll see that real easy. And at the bottom of that, if you click on that, and at the bottom of that, you'll see my links to what I've been talking about and other information. And I do have, I'm not that, an expert on things, but I did a lot of research with alternative media sources. So there's a lot of links to those groups that you can click on and see what they have to say about Dakota Access Pipeline and in the situation like that. So I hope that'll be helpful. Any questions? Okay. Oh, sure. Okay.
I forget what happened with the pipeline. Did they actually win, or did they put it in the place they didn't want it?
Oh, yeah, the pipeline's there. Yeah.
And also, what was that? Curb 2020? I couldn't understand.
Yeah, that's my last name, KERR 20.
Oh.
2020.
Yeah.
.com.
And then the Creating Better World, is that?
Well, that's what I call my website, but if you try to find it, you'll never find it.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, thanks very much, Mike. Really appreciate that.
Well, I'm sure there'll be actions in the more on the issue, so, look for it in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Tina T is going to come up and talk about not People's Park, the people part of it, but People's Park, the plant part of it. So that's going to be fun to hear. She's on her way now.
And one more thing, I have another flyer that's doom and gloom. So I'm going to pass it out, but you might want to read it when you're at home, and you can have a nice, something to drink. Okay, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I believe if you're going to solve a problem, you got to decide what the problem is, got to research it, and then you got to say what you think it's going to be. And it's, for me, it's not a good idea. I mean, it's not good news what I think is going to happen.
Okay, where's the thing? Da, 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 da. All right. Let's see. All right. Okay, hi everybody. How you doing? I have lots of nicknames, and one of the nicknames that I have had over the years in Berkeley is Tina. And because I used to feed the homeless, I used to drop a line from my apartment with food on it down to the street. anyway, for 15 years. And so people called me Tina. Anyway, I'm going to share some information about People's Park through the friends that I know have been active participants in planting. And so I'm just going to start over here. Whoops. With the wooden spoon. Okay, so the land, People's Park, before it was People's Park, was full of trees. Can we all imagine Berkeley just being trees? Can we all imagine that? Let's just close our eyes for 1 second and imagine what it was like to just have trees, the sound of birds. And we'll take a breath on that. All right, great. Okay, so People's Park belongs to the Ohlone people, Cho-Chenyo. I don't know how to say this word exactly. Does anybody know? Anyway, it's this is part of the territory of the XUCYUN. It's the Ohlone are the successors of the historic sovereign Verona Band of Alameda. Anyway, it's a collective of 50 tribes, and you can go to thepeoplespark.org for more information. The Costanoan Indians lived in Berkeley. Pretty cool. Anyway, so before it became People's Park, check. There were dwellings on the East End, apartments in a bunch of trees. And it was, amazingly enough, one of our local activist singer-song musicians, Carol Denny, actually lived in one of those places. And it was taken over by eminent domain. And they were forced out of their homes. The buildings were all destroyed. And you see, yeah. Anyway, in 1969, when the people, Delacour and hundreds or maybe thousands of people decided that they were going to make it a park for the people, they started ripping up the asphalt. And believe it or not, the asphalt is still there, was still there on the west end, and the trees were actually growing up through the asphalt this entire time. We're talking 55 decades. Pretty trippy. Anyway. So, there's a guy named David Axelrod. Maybe you've heard of him. He was a ranger in Berkeley at the time, and he, 1 second. I'm not doing that. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so David Axelrod, Charles Gray, Michael Delacour, the Native Plant Forum, and People's Park Project planted trees on the East End to mimic the Tilden Nature Garden. And I'm going to give you the list of the trees that they planted. Okay. 1 second. And, so this is the East End. That's the East End, this picture, 2.8 acres. 1 second. And just so you know, there were trees that predated People's Park. Sempervarians. What did I wrote it down. Oh, Canary Island date palm, and the largest coast redwood and incense cedar. Okay, so here's the list. Should probably use the mic, the spoon, and the phone at the same time. Okay, we'll see. Second. I'll just point it with the microphone. Oh, okay. So there were bay laurel, oak trees all along the eastern fence line. The redwoods, what do you call it? Redwoods, cedar, redwoods. Let's see. Acacia, small olive, the palm trees. There were 2 of them. Cedars. Let's see. Here. I have another idea. I'm just going to read the list, okay, because it's too bananas. Okay, so bay laurel, California lilac, Catalina ironwood, Canary Island palm, which are over here, Catalina ironwood, Canyon live oak, coast live oak, coast redwood, Douglas fir, eastern white oak, eucalyptus or gum tree, giant sequoia, big tree, incense cedar, loquat tree, Monterey cypress, Monterey pine, olive-like shrub, olive tree, and valley oak. And those were the trees that they planted back in 1970, the early 70s or the mid 70s. Okay. 1 second. So on the west end, I'll go through the list and tell you what they planted. One moment. Oh, yeah, the west end is the stage side. 1 second. Okay, where's this? Here we go. Okay, so on the west end, there is an apple tree, an ash tree, a bamboo tree, a Canary Island date palm tree, coast live oak, coast redwood, cotton aster shrub, cypress trees, fig tree, lantana bush, lemon tree, loquat tree, locust tree, maple tree, Norfolk Island pine, orange tree, peach tree, pear tree, plum tree, pomegranate tree, rose bushes, valley or roble oak, wattle or acacia tree, and willow trees. And these are the trees that these folks planted along with volunteers during and since the autumn of 1979 and the winter of 1980. Pretty cool. So over the course of the years, people planted trees. In the early 90s, a hippie came into People's Park with a bunch of avocado trees, and they were there. They were about 25 feet tall. A couple of years ago, they did really well. Anyway, I was asked to write a list for the attorneys who were fighting the eminent domain, and I'm just going to read some part of my story that I wrote for them. Okay, just hold on. I have to find it. Okay, just one second. Let's see. Well, let's see. Okay. Okay. I also have a story that I'm writing that should be submitted to the People's Park Council, so you could see that. And some of the stuff is a bit redundant, but you can just skim over it. And it'll have a lot more photographs than I have today, because I have other SD cards, and I didn't give them the right SD card. I gave them an SD card. So, 1 second. Okay, let's see. All right. Well, I'll just briefly say that I first went to do gardening in People's Park in 1982. Was my first time there, and I was working off parking citations. I mowed the lawn. It took several days. Okay, 1 second. Where is it? Okay. All right, well, I'm still looking for it, so let me show you some photographs of People's Park and the foliage from after the 53rd anniversary. I took a bunch of photographs, and it'll just give you a little concept. Okay. Oh, right, it's at the bottom, eh? Oh, my bad. Sorry. This one down here. Okay, my bad. Okay. This is a 42 feet tall pear tree. There were clusters of pears dangling from the branches, way out of reach, except for someone on stilts. And there were about 4 and 5 dangling from the tree. It was really beautiful. This is part of the southwestern side. And there's, as you can see, lots of, the purple flowers are wild radish. And the green with the yellow is actually a Jerusalem sage. Mainly an East Coast sage, but really grows very well in the park. And then looking beyond, there's some tents. And then there's a, it looks like a red, I don't know if that's the, let's see. I don't know if that's I think that's a rose. And then just directly up center is actually the pomegranate, but it's not in bloom yet. Anyway. Oops, I screwed up. Okay, here we go. And so there's the Jerusalem sage, really awesome. And these are just flowering bushes up along the back end that runs the length of the collard forest. There's a collard forest that actually ran about 20 feet off of Dwight all the way to about 20 feet off of Haste. It's collards, greens. Those collard greens have been growing there for 50 years. Some of them are 12 feet tall. They all go to seed, and there's just massive amounts of seed, and then they just all regrow again. In that area, it was also an elder tree that was about 30 feet tall with a 30-foot diameter, just blooming with berries. A locust tree, super flowered, big, dangling, awesome flowers. A maple tree. Numerous plum trees. It's pretty much a paradise for migrating birds and local birds, and also for people who are hungry, who like fruit. And then I know lots of people, including myself, who actually utilized the collard greens, and I'm sure it's been hundreds of people over the years. It turns out a good pal of mine, who's right now hiking in Scotland, couldn't make it tonight, but he actually relied on those collard greens for sustenance for the last 20 years. Here's some shrooms on one of the bases of the tree that is no longer existing. This is just one of the beautiful trees up on the west end. This is a squirrel's nest, and it may be a locust tree. That branch that squirrel nest is on is about 30 feet in length. Pretty cool. And so the great part about the park is that it had sun and shade. It had everything. It was an island oasis, our national park, an island oasis, right in the heart of Southside. Anyway, whoops. These, we're not going to go down the road here. I'm going to skip right through these. And so here's some trees. I think that in this is the fig tree is on the right-hand side. And while I was there, the figs were this. They were about 4 inches in length, super figs. And my friend said those look like blackjack figs, but pretty awesome. Anyway, and then the berries along the back fence. We're talking 40 feet of raspberries, blackberries. Just amazing. It was the amazing community garden. And here's some stuff that's over by the spigot, just a variety of plants, including crocosmia and all kinds of stuff. There's a lemon on one side of it. The elderberries behind it, really cool. And here's the pear again. Looks pretty cool. And then this is the pomegranate tree in bloom, totally awesome. It's about, the canopy for that was about 20 feet in diameter, maybe, and it was only about 15 feet tall. But ready and waiting, incoming, migrating birds. Anyway, here's just a few pictures of the camp and some of the trees that are down. I don't really want to discuss that at this time. I'd rather wait until another time. And this is the Catalina ironwood right here. Pretty cool. And that's it for the slideshow. Okay, so I'm going to say some other things about, so the thing that I used to dream about was to try to save People's Park for the bees and the birds and migrating and the local birds, because it's actually that plot of land, that 2.8 acres, is what is called an open woodland. And open woodlands are really a key for birds because it has everything they need. If they're flying through this open space and predators come after them, they can go any direction and hide in any of the trees in the surrounding perimeter. It had over 22 fruiting trees on the west end. Fruit is fuel for them to survive. And, for 54 years of birds going there, it's basically, they see it as an island. That is a source for them to feed, rest, perch, relax, fuel up on their journeys. And now it's changed. Anyway, 1 second. So my friend Grayson, who's in Scotland right now, he and I planted 4 coast live oaks seedlings that I got from my garden job and that he had growing on his back porch. And a Grecian bay and a Lebanese cedar. And when we were planting them, we were dreaming about what they would be like in 50 years. Now, a Lebanese cedar actually gets bigger than a redwood tree at the base, 6 feet in diameter. But, a lot of people, they're sensitive to cedar, so maybe that's not a good plant to plant there. And the Grecian bay, if you plant 2 of them, they'll have a zillion babies. They smell really good. It's a hardwood. Although it's not native to here, they're pretty awesome. Anyway, Aiden and planted some other trees. They planted a dawn redwood, and that was about 6 feet tall when we planted the Grecian bay, about 35 feet away from that. Anyway, there's been lots and lots of gardeners over the decades, and I love them all. They're awesome. And everybody brings their own flair to that place. Anyway, I'm going to do the list for the West, unless, I think it's time for me to wrap up. Okay, I'll just wrap it up, and then I'll do some more next time. Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tina T. Does anybody have any questions for her?
I thought the park was enclosed.
No, that's before they...
Oh, I thought these
This
trees
is-
down and everything?
No, see, if you look through that tree, you can see there's a car. Yeah. This is pre-containers. Yeah. I'll bring that up. We'll talk about that next time.
Well, I was just wondering, I've driven by it, and I think I've walked past the park once or twice, but since I'm not in the area, I never really enjoyed the park. But I noticed it's got all these big containers going all the way around the park. 2 or 3 tall?
Okay, my resolution
So what's
to
the
that.
status right
What's
now?
the status of that? Well, I think that we need to do is build a Trojan bear with long arms and roll it around the park so we can get everybody into the park and keep them out of the park since they've built the wall. But unfortunately, they are in the midst of building cement blocks. So it's kind of, I don't know, but I will say that they have gotten in. They have planted gardens on the interior side of the containers. And it would be really good for you to just maybe go to a aerial view of the park, and so you can see, because I don't want to say anything, because I don't want to get bummed out. Anyway, just like...
Any more questions for Tina? Great. Thanks so much, Tina. I really appreciate that. It was really nice. Well, thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. If you want to catch up on earlier meetings that we had here. It's all on YouTube, Berkeley History Club. And we meet the second Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock for potluck, 7 o'clock for the program. And hopefully you can come again. There's no hurry to leave. We're gonna, this is the purpose, I didn't say this earlier, the purpose of the Berkeley History Club has two purposes. One, to build a club, a place where people can connect with each other. And so if you're talking with people, you're doing the right thing. And number two is to talk about history. So we've done both, a little bit of both of that tonight, and we're gonna keep doing it, hopefully. And hopefully you will be here with us, doing it with us. Thanks so much for coming.